You've probably passed by them every day. They're in the water, in the skies, and even on land. In fact, they're just about everywhere. And that's the problem. They shouldn't be. We're talking about invasive species. Invasive species are plants or animals that have somehow spread to places outside of where they're usually naturally found. Invasive species are a massive problem, and just about every country in the world has their own invasive species problem to deal with. First off, we should know that not every species that's introduced into a new environment will become an invasive species. Their new habitat might not be suitable for them, and they might die off before they ever have a chance to get established. But for some species, their new home might be exactly what they need to thrive. And that's the problem. In their new habitat, there's nothing keeping those invasive species in check, nothing that preys on them or competes with them. Invasive species spread rapidly and can quickly overwhelm and unbalance ecosystems. Invasive species can devastate native species. They introduce diseases that native species have no immunity to, and they threaten and alter natural habitats and environments so they become inhospitable for native species. For example, this is a yellow iris. It looks like a beautiful, showy plant you might find in someone's garden, and in fact it has been cultivated and sold in garden nurseries across Canada. Originally native to Europe, Western Asia, and Northwest Africa, this plant has spread across Canada, threatening fragile wetland ecosystems in its wake. The yellow iris rapidly covers native wetlands, suffocating and crowding out native plant species and reducing water flow. Not only do invasive species threaten native species and ecosystems, they also pose a threat to human health and the economy. For example, giant hogweed is a particularly nasty invasive species. This plant contains highly toxic sap that causes extremely painful burning blisters, which can take weeks to heal, resulting in long-lasting scars. Finally, in Canada, it's estimated that every year 13 to 35 $1 billion in revenue is lost due to invasive species. In British Columbia, the agricultural industry loses $50 million from invasive plants like knapweed, which infests fields, degrading rangeland and decreasing food quantities for both livestock and wildlife. In their natural and native environments, invasive species aren't so bad. These species are where they're meant to be, and they aren't invasive there. They have their own roles to play in their native habitats. It's when they're introduced to other places, that's when they become a problem. Sometimes invasive species are introduced to new environments completely by accident. They can be accidentally introduced in plant products like firewood or hay, or introduced in live food imports or in ballast water released from ships. Or they can be carried into new places on vehicles like aircrafts, boats, cars, or even bicycles. You might recognize this next invasive species. This is an Asian giant hornet. In 2019, it caused quite a bit of stir in the media when several individuals were found in British Columbia. Asian giant hornets may have been introduced to Canada accidentally on container ships traveling internationally. Sometimes invasive species are introduced to new environments intentionally. For example, this is a European starling, and despite being native to Europe, this bird can be found all across North America, from Alaska to Mexico. What's crazy about this bird is all the European starlings in North America are descended from just 100 birds that were set loose in New York's Central Park in the early 1890s. These birds were introduced intentionally by a group of well-meaning Shakespeare enthusiasts who wanted Central Park to have all of the birds ever mentioned in the bard's work. And what's crazier, it took several introductions before the birds were successfully established. From there, they spread like wildfire, outcompeting native species and causing serious agricultural damage. If every country in the world has their own invasive species problem to deal with, and if there are so many different invasive species in the world, it might seem like an impossible task to try and do something about it. But there are things that you can do to help. You can help fight the spread of invasive species, and the best way to do this is to prevent them from occurring in the first place. If you garden, plant native species, and while you're at it, get rid of anything that's been designated as an invasive species in your area. There are plenty of online resources to help you identify native and invasive plant species. Also, be aware of wildflower seed mixes. Just because they've been labeled wildflowers doesn't mean they're native to your area. If you're an outdoor enthusiast and love to go hiking, biking, or boating, be aware that you could be transporting invasive species on your shoes, tires, or boats. So before you hike or bike in a new area, clean your shoes and tires thoroughly of hitchhiking seeds and pathogens. That goes for other off-road vehicles as well. And when boating, clean your boat thoroughly before transporting it to a new body of water to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. Zebra and quagga mussels are becoming an increasing threat across Canada from unaware boaters transporting them across the country. You can also volunteer with local invasive species monitoring and management programs. And finally, educate yourself and others. The more you know about invasive species in your area, the better you can help your local native habitats. Remember, you can report sightings and help prevent the spread of invasive species. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you soon!